85,000 feet, higher than any fighter could follow. A warning light flickers on in the cockpit. Somewhere far below, a surface-to-air missile has just left its launcher. It is accelerating past 3 times the speed of sound, guided by radar, built for exactly one purpose: to kill this aircraft. In any other plane, the pilot would have seconds to make his peace. But this pilot doesn't panic. He follows the official evasive procedure, a maneuver no other aircraft in history could pull off. He pushes the throttle forward, and he simply leaves. Over 24 years of missions, an estimated 4,000 missiles were fired at this aircraft. Every single one of them missed. This is the story of the SR-71 Blackbird, the plane that retired undefeated. May 1st, 1960, an American U-2 spy plane is cruising high over the Soviet Union. And then it isn't. A surface-to-air missile tears it out of the sky. The pilot, Francis Gary Powers, is captured alive and paraded in front of the world. The message is clear. Flying high is no longer enough. Missiles can climb. But American intelligence still needed eyes over hostile territory. Satellites were primitive. Drones barely existed. Someone still had to fly into the most heavily defended airspace on Earth and come back. So, the request that landed at Lockheed's secret Skunk Works division sounded almost like a joke. Build a plane that flies so high and so fast that nothing on Earth can touch it. The engineers ran the numbers. To survive, the plane would need to cruise at more than 3 times the speed of sound. Not in short bursts like a fighter, but for hours at a time. Except the math led somewhere impossible. At that speed, the air itself, compressed and superheated against the airframe, would push skin temperatures past 300 degrees Celsius. Aluminum, the metal every aircraft was built from, would soften and fail. The plane they needed couldn't be built from anything America had. The answer was titanium. Nearly as strong as steel, at almost half the weight, and able to shrug off heat that would destroy any conventional airframe. The Blackbird would be roughly 85% titanium. No one had ever attempted anything close. The strangest part is where the metal came from. In the 1960s, the world's largest supplier of aerospace-grade titanium was the Soviet Union, the very country this plane was being built to spy on. So the CIA went shopping. It set up a network of shell companies and fake buyers around the world, quietly purchasing Soviet titanium through third countries. On paper, the metal was destined for pizza ovens, textile machinery, industrial pipes. Shipments changed hands several times while still at sea so that no one could trace the metal's real destination: Burbank, California. The Skunk Works. The Soviet Union sold the Americans the very material that would be used to photograph their most secret military bases. And they never knew. Kelly Johnson's engineers had their metal. Now they had to solve problems nobody had ever faced. Some of their solutions still sound like madness. If you had stood next to a Blackbird on the runway, you would have seen something alarming: fuel seeping from the seams of the aircraft's skin onto the tarmac. Not a malfunction, a design feature. At Mach 3, the airframe would heat up so much that the entire aircraft grew, stretching 3 to 4 inches in flight. If the panels had fit tightly on the ground, the expanding metal would have buckled and torn itself apart at speed. So, Lockheed built the plane loose. On the ground, the panels didn't quite seal, and the special JP-7 fuel wept through the gaps. Only at full speed, with the airframe hot and fully expanded, did the Blackbird finally become whole. This was the only aircraft ever built that was broken on the ground and perfect at Mach 3. The crews learned to love it. A leaking Blackbird was a healthy Blackbird. Even the color was engineering. That deep, menacing black wasn't chosen to look intimidating. Black paint radiates heat far better than bare metal, bleeding off some of the furnace-level heat the airframe endured, and it was laced with radar-absorbing material. The name followed the physics: Blackbird. From the cockpit, at cruising altitude, the sky above was black in the middle of the day. Pilots could see the curvature of the Earth. Below them, entire countries slid past like maps. The numbers behind that view are official world records, set on July 28, 1976, and never broken since. Speed, 3,529 kilometers per hour. That's 2,193 miles per hour, as fast as a rifle bullet leaves the muzzle. Sustained altitude, 85,069 feet. In 1974, a Blackbird flew from New York to London in 1 hour and 54 minutes. A commercial airliner takes 7 hours. Keeping it flying took an armada. The Blackbird burned fuel so fast that it usually took off light, then met a tanker at altitude to fill its tanks before heading to work. The Air Force kept a fleet of 56 specially modified tankers in service, largely to support 32 Blackbirds. Even the crew's last meal on the ground was engineered: steak and eggs, the same high-protein, low-residue breakfast the astronauts ate, because once that suit sealed shut, it stayed shut for the entire mission. At those altitudes, the crew couldn't survive in a normal cockpit. They wore full pressure suits, the same kind astronauts wore, because if the cabin failed, the fluids in their bodies would begin to boil. Every flight started like a space launch. Suit technicians, oxygen pre-breathing, a team of specialists sealing 2 men into a machine that flew on the edge of space. And unlike astronauts, they flew straight into airspace where people were actively trying to kill them. And they tried. Over Vietnam, over North Korea, over the Middle East. Radar operators locked on, launch officers fired, and surface-to-air missiles climbed toward the stratosphere at Mach 3. None of it mattered. A radar crew spots the Blackbird inbound. They calculate an intercept point, launch, and the missile climbs, burning through its fuel in under a minute. But the target is moving at nearly a kilometer every second. By the time the missile claws its way up to 85,000 feet, the intercept point it was aimed at is empty sky. The Blackbird is already miles downrange. The geometry never worked. To hit a target moving at Mach 3.2, at that altitude, every variable has to be perfect. Detection, timing, launch angle, guidance, and against the Blackbird, nothing was ever perfect. The official evasive maneuver, written into the manual, was one line: accelerate. Across more than 3,500 operational missions, an estimated 4,000 missiles were fired at SR-71s. The result of all that firepower, all those years, all that radar, and all that Soviet engineering, not one hit. No Blackbird was ever lost to enemy action. Pilots described watching missile launches behind them with something close to calm. The light comes on. You push the throttle. The missile becomes a bright dot falling away far behind you, defeated by pure arithmetic. But the Blackbird had one enemy it could never outrun: itself. January 1966. Test pilot Bill Weaver and flight engineer Jim Zweier were pushing an early Blackbird through a test at Mach 3.18 and nearly 79,000 feet when an engine inlet malfunctioned. The aircraft snapped out of control and disintegrated around them in seconds. Weaver never pulled the ejection handle. The breakup was so violent, it ripped him straight out of the aircraft at 3 times the speed of sound. And he survived. His pressure suit inflated, shielding him like a personal spacecraft as he tumbled down from nearly 80,000 feet until his parachute opened on its own. He woke up drifting over a New Mexico ranch. Jim Zweier didn't make it. His neck was broken in the breakup. It was a brutal reminder of what this machine demanded from the men who flew it, and Weaver. 2 weeks later, he was back in the cockpit of another Blackbird. Mid-flight, a warning light came on. Pilot ejected. His new crewmate's hatch indicator had malfunctioned. Weaver just keyed the intercom, checked that his backseater was still there, and kept flying. That was the kind of pilot this program built. Of 32 Blackbirds built, 12 were lost over the years. All 12 to accidents, never to an enemy. In the end, the Blackbird wasn't shot down. It was signed away. Each flight cost a fortune. Spy satellites were improving. And in an era of shrinking budgets, the Pentagon retired its untouchable plane. When the Air Force flew one to a museum outside Washington in 1990, it set a coast-to-coast speed record on the way out the door. Half a century later, its records still stand. No air breathing, manned aircraft has ever flown faster or cruised higher. The missiles it humiliated are in museums now too. 4,000 shots, 4,000 misses. That warning light in the cockpit, the one that meant a missile was coming, Blackbird crews knew what it really meant. In any other aircraft, it was a death sentence. In this one, it was just a suggestion to go faster. If you want more stories of machines that rewrote the rules of war, subscribe. The next one is already in production.